What happens when healing is not just about the body, but also about the home you live in, the mindset you carry, and the environment surrounding you every day? For many people dealing with implant illness, the path to healing can feel confusing, overwhelming, and deeply personal. Today's guest is helping bring clarity to that process through a more complete approach in detoxing the home, body, and mind. Welcome back to the Practice Pulse, where we dive into health and wellness innovations and break down how real businesses grow, scale, and operate behind the scenes. I'm your host, Nancy Margrit, founder of Optima Pro AI, where we build practical systems and operational infrastructure that help businesses scale while retaining the human touch. Today, I'm joined by Today, I'm joined by Sharon Surita, founder of Functionally Enlightened, a company that's helping people heal from implant illness through her D-point approach, detoxing the home, body, and mind. Sharon, I'm really excited to have you here for this conversation because what you're doing sits at the intersection of health, environment, and mindset. And it's a space where a lot of people are searching for real sustainable solutions. So thank you so much for being on the show with us.
Yes, thank you so much for allowing me to join you on the show and to share with your audience about how to heal from implant illness.
We're excited. So, why don't you start us off by telling a little bit about your background and what led you to the space originally? What kind of gap did you see that wasn't being addressed in traditional healthcare or wellness?
For sure. So for me, it was both professional and personal. As an environmental engineer by trade, I received a PhD back in 2015. And now I kind of pivoted to the functional health space, specifically something known as functional diagnostic nutrition, and just kind of utilizing what I knew. I understood toxicity exposure on paper. I understood the design mechanisms in the environment, but it wasn't until I experienced my own implant illness when I really understood that the body has a capacity and that if there are significant burdens, we can exceed that capacity. And so it became very clear very quickly for me, immediately upon a surgery, that the health system we're currently living with is incredibly disjointed. And you have one provider looking at hormones, one looking at gut health, another looking at mental health, but no one was actually looking at how the systems were interacting. And so we looked at that. I looked at that and really seeing that major gap, especially around surgery. So there's very little preparation when it comes to what I call pre-talks or the beforehand focused. There's nothing on detoxing, nothing on opening drainage pathways, nutrient status even, or immune resilience. They're really only focused on infection monitoring and wound healing, right? Around nothing pre-talks and nothing after surgery. So post-operatively, there's really not much guidance. And then there's that piece about the informed consent. So patients are going into surgery thinking that it's routine repair, something that they can probably go back to work in 2 or 3 weeks, but they don't have the education or the knowledge about the potential systemic implications, what it might look like from months to years down the line. And that's really the gap that I stepped into and why I really generated the 3D point approach to fill in that and to give people and bodies the fighting chance to go through these types of procedures.
That's great. And you bring up a really pertinent point that comes up a lot in these conversations that we have all of these different, they're almost like in a business, you have your COO and your chief marketing officer and you have your chief operations officer, but there's always a CEO. And we don't really have that in the healthcare system where there's someone that's really taking a look holistically to make sure that everyone is communicating appropriately and that we really have the whole body in mind as we look through things. So I think that's a very valid point as we're having these conversations. So tell me a little bit about what like the most common problems that your clients are coming to you for right now when it comes to implant illness.
Yeah, so they don't come to me specifically saying I have implant illness.
Okay.
They come to me saying they've had an implant and they've heard of what I offer. I have a podcast myself and I have a book that published on healing from implant illness. So they're just starting to make the connection and they're thinking, what if this is ultimately one of the root causes? Because there's so many root causes. And they come to me with what we call Asia syndrome. So if your audience isn't familiar with Asia syndrome, that is similar to autoimmune conditions. The acronym stands for autoinflammatory we'll start back. Autoinflammatory syndrome induced by adjuvants. So it's a mouthful, and we refer
Mm-hmm.
to it as Asia syndrome.
Okay.
And so the cluster of symptoms presents similar to dysautonomia, where you could have this autonomic nervous system that's dysregulated. You're having gut issues, slowed motility, you're having alternating constipation and diarrhea, sleep disruption, hormone imbalance, you're having these anxiety or panic attacks that can come spontaneously without a trigger. So many different symptoms, including cardiovascular. So tachycardia, people have both hypo and hypertension. And then the same thing with the blood pressure dysregulation. Some people have elevated blood sugar and some people are having suboptimal blood sugar. So we're having these glycemic crashes a lot happening.
That's interesting. So they recognize the symptoms, but they don't necessarily know exactly what they have when they're coming to you. Okay, awesome. So, why don't you tell me a little bit about your core model or your methodology? Like, walk me through your 3-point approach, and then how that actually works in practice when someone comes into your world.
Yeah, for sure. So the 3D point approach is a focus on detoxing the home, body, and mind, as you kind of mentioned in the introduction. And we do the point approach, which is an acronym. Again, we love acronyms. Point stands for pre-tox, optimize, integrate, nourish, and transform. But what that is that we're looking at that 3D approach within each category. So initially with pre-tox, some people come to me before they're having their initial surgery. Most often, I work with the mesh implant community. So these are people who know they're having a hernia repair, and the doctors are suggesting mesh to be the gold standard. So we can approach pre-tox. Really, this is the ideal time to approach it, just before anything. But more than 80% of the people that do come to me have already had surgery. And so they are working on the detoxification journey afterwards, some pursuing an explant after the fact, but they know that their body's really not strong enough at that point to pursue that option. So pre-tox is really about lightening the load that is coming at them in a daily fashion. So we're looking at what they're eating, what products they're having, personal care products, for instance, or cleaning products. We want to make sure that things are free of synthetic chemicals, free of fragrances and parfum, different types of chemicals that we may not be aware of. Siloxanes, for example, is something I studied in my dissertation studies. It's just really upsetting that chemical names can be masked under other more benign names. And so we're not really aware of what is found in our products. So really that deep dive into pre-tox comes into looking at what they're consuming, proper hydration with filtered water, air quality, and again, what is coming into either their workspace, their home, or both, preferably, wherever they're spending a majority of their time. So that is starting with pre-tox. Do you want me to go forward with the
Yeah,
optimize?
tell
All
us
right. So,
more.
so optimize, it's really synergistic. So we're going to be working with all the things at once, just kind of phased approaches based on tolerance. But optimize comes in place where we really start looking at a person's individual metabolic type. So most people can come in and they're not fully aware of the macronutrient ratios that are optimal for them for energy production and mood regulation, as well as, again, the blood sugar stabilization. So Optimize will take a look. This is the first functional lab or functional test that we can review. It is quick response, so we can get started with this pretty quickly and make sure they're adjusting the macronutrients to their best or their optimal metabolic type. With that, we also dive into food sensitivities. So this kind of pushes us into integrate now, because a lot of the functional labs will take, 2 to 3 weeks to get results back. And as we are optimizing with the current findings, we also will use functional lab testing like the Dutch hormone testing. We'll use GI map for stool testing. And this will tell us about, the health of the gut. If there's dysbiosis there, it will tell us if there's parasitic infections. Not all of the parasitic infections are noted here, but it gives us a good ground for the state of the gut. It can also tell us if there's that term that we see so often, leaky gut, right? So with this, we have mucosal barrier assessments to really drill down and see if there's a histamine intolerance or maybe just damage to the inside of the gut that prevents us from being able to generate these enzymes necessary to break down histamine. So we can be very focused on not just the analytes that are measured, but looking at the patterns. And so I haven't listed all of the functional labs because again, this is something that is very bio individual based on what we discussed during the initial intake. But we will go through all of the clinical correlations that are made from their health assessments and then the functional labs that were chosen for their particular cases.
Wow, that seems like it's a very thorough, testing process that you have, and I love that you're actually doing a pre-interview kind of form where you figure out what tests do we actually need. Very cool. Very, very thorough. Love it. Tell me some things that your clients may have typically tried before finding your approach, and where do those approaches tend to fall short?
Yes, absolutely. I love this question. This question is one that I really dove into just as I was doing data gathering and research. As I worked on the book, I did do a survey reaching out to people who have joined support groups for potential implant illness or just what would I say? Surgical trauma, I guess is the proper word to use here. And so they all contributed to the pool of responses. And that was one of the questions. Like I gave them a form with several options based on what my clients have dabbled in, and then puts a place for them, a placeholder for them to add their additional modalities. And so we were seeing things like, of course, pain management, because we're talking again about surgical trauma. And that is one thing with inflammation. They do have that chronic pain that can be localized but also systemic. So they've done the pain management route. They've done surgical routes like seeking out additional surgical treatments to either remove or repair. Some people to remove body organs, as you probably discussed many times. It's not always that people can use the proper lab testing and monitor and then catch these things before it escalates, for instance, to gallbladder removal. That's such a common surgical procedure that people just they just accept it as the norm. But I'm kind of diverging here. Let me go back to
No, that's
the
okay. Yeah.
modalities. So there were things, of course, life coaching, physical therapy, chiropractic care, functional neurology, which is one that actually ranked really high in terms of effectiveness. And that includes a whole nother slew of modalities or micro modalities within there, especially the neuro psychiatric or what we can call as neuroplasticity training devices. Those were all ranking high. And I've had so many people approach it through like medical marijuana, also through again psychiatric help or psychological help because they've been through that gambit of gaslighting and just haven't had the help that they needed in the conventional health space, and that they begin to believe that maybe it is in their brains. And as you can think that this modality was not instrumental in addressing the actual problems. It may have numbed some of the pain in a certain sense, but it was not one of those modalities that ranked high in what we call is like the improvement of function once we looked at our survey results.
Right. Yeah, it's scary, and I love that you use the term gaslighting because it really is when you're being told that one thing is happening and causing this in your body, and to find as you continue to have no success or little success with implementing different things that this was not in fact the root cause, that it was actually coming from the surgery that you just had or that you had several years ago. Okay, tell me a little bit, like tell me something that most people misunderstand about healing from implant illness or detoxing from the body and the environment.
Yeah, I think the biggest one is going to be that detox is only about removing toxins. And it's not really. It's about elimination capacity because we are constantly exposed to toxins on a daily basis. No matter where you live, whether it be rural or suburban or very urbanized setting, you have constant exposure. And your body's already working with that, right? It's trying to eliminate. And it most often does have capacity to at least maintain some kind of balance for a certain amount of time in the person's life. But if you're not working at making sure you have the ability to eliminate first via the stool, through breathing, through sweating, and then for women, we have the menses that also they've seen scientific data that shows that there's toxins being eliminated through the blood. Um, we can see that if we're not looking at the capacity that and we're just really focusing on detox, if some people can actually become worse because they're thinking more detox is better rather than the sequence of detox. And that is really what it boils down to. Sequencing a healing journey is everything.
That's interesting. Could you expand on that a little bit about sequencing and how that affects things?
Yeah. When people think of the word detox, and your audience may have done certain detox protocols in the past, they might think of a juice cleanse, or they might think of a very restricted diet, ketogenic or carnivore, even vegan, full vegan diet. So they're going at it at a increased rate, we'll say. But the body's capacity may not be there to be able to process whatever nutrition they're putting in their body. At the same time, not looking at the environment, which is key. And then the mental component, the emotional component is often neglected. So they really are just looking at one thing. I'm going to eat this diet because according to this influencer, this is what they used to heal from, quote, whatever dysautonomia or whatever chronic illness they have been labeled with. And I guess that makes it two things then. The label, the diagnosis is the other misconception that we're not treating a diagnosis. There's just about it's about looking at the hidden imbalances or the hidden stressors that are causing imbalances in the body. So the two things, like delineating what you're doing to try to return to function, regain health, and making sure your body does have elimination capacity.
Great. That was a great explanation. What stands out to me here is how comprehensive your approach is because you're not just addressing one variable, you're looking at the full system around the person and how to really bring them back to homeostasis, which I think is oftentimes our goal is, right? How do we get back to that normal state for our bodies? Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit, we'll shift and talk a little bit about business. So, like some operations and systems. What does your current journey look like for someone who's discovering you? So where do they find you and then becoming a client? So from the first touch point to then actually working with you.
Yeah, and there are multiple avenues. So some people can find on social media, but once they get to either the booking link or on the website, they decide they want to pursue a package. It really starts with that discovery call, and this is where we do that clinical screening that I mentioned before. We're assessing the history and the timeline, and also the readiness, because when a person is going to commit to the type of protocol development that I put into it, then there really has to be that level of readiness there. They should be committed to approaching this all in.
Mhm.
And so from there, the clients do enter either a 3-month or a 6-month program, depending on the complexity. Most often we see, this kind of goes back to misconceptions about healing and detox protocols being only a few weeks. But when we look at pre-tox and detoxing, all three of those avenues, it's really going to take 3 months and beyond. Sometimes we start seeing some progress pretty quickly within those 3 months, but most often it's going to require a little bit more time, right? But as we see progression, even within 6 months, there's so much more improvement in functionality. And this is a metric that I'm studying with all of my clients. Like, what is the percent increase in whatever function, whatever was the primary complaint? And so that's one of the data metrics that helps me drive what works and what doesn't work. And then from there, again, once they sign up, we develop or we build a personalized plan, multiple conversations to make sure we are hitting on the things that are the primary concern, but also at the capacity and the ability of said person, as well as making it sustainable. So it's not something just overly stimulating to the body. We need to make sure that things are to tolerance. And then from here, we have our biweekly coaching calls. We have what I call a results and recommendation session. Anytime there's any labs to review, the functional lab testing, those are a little bit more lengthy. And so I like to provide them with resources and education around what the labs are measuring and how they correlate to their symptoms.
That's awesome. That's great when you see somebody actually using the data that comes in because it's so important. That's how we create feedback loops and that's how we progress is by recognizing, okay, here's what's working and here's what's not. And you have to analyze the data. So I love that you're incorporating that into your process. Where do you see the biggest challenges in reaching or supporting more people right now in terms of as you grow and scale?
Honestly, there are a couple of things. One of them is I'll call it a healthy level of skepticism, because the people that find me, they've already been through the gambit with the conventional health space, and even some have sought out functional health and just they've tried so many things without relief. So there's that trust barrier, and they come in hesitant in the beginning, and we really do work together, and you could see that barrier kind of coming down because they can feel the empathy for one. I'm sure I've been there. I have been bedbound, and I know what it takes to kind of claw your way out of those trenches. So I really give my focus to each client that I'm working with when they have me for that time, and then even through ongoing messaging through our platform. So the complex cases, they're multi-system, they're long-standing, they impact or they involve the nervous system. So it's just kind of the reassuring them continuously that progress is going to require patience and again the sequencing.
Okay, awesome. That brings me to my next questions. You do have a lot of personalized care. So how do you kind of balance balance the business side and being able to grow and scale with that personalized care?
Hmm. And this has been a growing process. So, month to month, things can change a little bit. With initially, my podcast was where I was given the resources out, providing people with tips from leading surgeons and also from other chronic illness warriors. So, I did interview a lot of people who went through similar processes, and we would just share the resource of what modalities were working, what wasn't, where they kind of hit bottlenecks or roadblocks down the road. So starting from there and expanding to now we have a team of three. So potentially we want to expand to have other health practitioners come in for coaching positions. But as of now, we have someone who is working with social media and graphics, either virtual assistants. And so they are helping with newsletters and just managing different platforms like Go High Level, the newsletter and the landing pages there. And then, of course, I have someone handling the video editing and the audio editing for any interviews that I do, so that we can hit core messages without like bogging down people because sometimes the technical jargon can become overwhelming.
Mhm. That's great. It sounds like you've done a really good job of building a team around you, which I think is one of the key markers of success of a company is being able to really identify who has a stronger suit in this area and who can we bring in to assist with this so that you're really able to focus where your passion and your skill set is. So as you've grown this, what has been harder than expected in building and scaling this kind of work?
Well, the amount of hours in the day is not enough, right? We
I
wa
agree.
we wanna help so many people, and whenever you bring on a new client, and as I mentioned, I do a really, really deep dive, so it's not just the hours that I spend in front of them, whether they be virtual or in person, it's the hours that I put into the research and the hours that I spent into developing the protocol, and like I said, there's course corrections along the way, so it's not a static thing, it's always evolving, it's very fluid and dynamic. So there's a lot of time invested in there, and then also just providing different pieces of information that is digestible to people. So whether it's a blog or a newsletter or the book, like I mentioned, the book was a huge undertaking. And then just understanding that some people may need a little more guidance and some people might be more independent. So just kind of managing that whole dynamic as well.
Yeah. It's important to meet people where they're at, and it takes a process to do that. So I understand that completely. For other practitioners or founders in the space, what's one thing that you wish more people understood about building a business in functional health?
I would say that tracking is crucial. Like begin tracking from day one. You don't want people to slip through the cracks in terms of making their health journey, right? Or making their making progress. And if someone's stuck somewhere, like it's important to have and there might come with an investment that is required. Like certain platforms are usable, more friendly, more user friendly, like Asana for tracking progress. Also, if you have a CRM or a client retention management software, that would be ideal to have once you're taking on, more than 3 or 4 clients. It becomes a hindrance to your time and your effectiveness to manage these things with other platforms like Excel or Word or folders like hard folders. It doesn't practically it's just going to take away from more of the time that you can direct towards the things that really matter.
Yeah, you've gotta have that integrated, and that's what our company does is really trying to take some of the I call it pajama work, like the stuff that you're doing late at night in your pajamas to get get done, taking those tasks off of your plate so that you're really able to focus more on the patient or the client and building that human relationship. So as you look ahead, what does growth look like for you? Is it expanding your reach? Is it evolving your current programs, or is it something else?
It's a combination of things. So expanding the reach to provide this to more people. I know with the implant injury, we're hearing more and more from the breast implant illness community. Implant illness, so that's the sister, acronym BII and MII. It's starting to evolve. And so we want to provide these things to give people a head start and also just like a quick way to begin implementing certain things that will definitely improve their functionality. I can't say I haven't come across one person that hasn't had improvement, even just implementing some of the core philosophies about functional health. So the reach expansion with that in mind, and then also evolving because there is so much technology being generated day by day, different modalities coming up. If you look at health influencers out there, you see vagus nerve devices like popping up left and right.
Mhm.
So we need to research what is the most effective, what has clinical studies backing it up, and then really looking at the application within your client demographic. Is it really working, or is it not something to recommend?
That's a great point because there's I mean, just with the onset of AI and just the expansion and the access to information
Mm,
and the ease of starting a business or creating a product, we've really run into like, okay, we really need to take the time to assess is this doing what it says it's doing? Is this worth it? Looking at those types of things. So that kind of this is kind of out of sequence here a little bit, but I'd like you, if you don't mind, to share maybe the story of a client that has had success. Obviously, leaving out names or health details, but just tell me a little bit about what a client has come to you experiencing, and then what it looked like as they went through your program and then exited.
yeah, absolutely. So I do primarily work with women. Women come to seek me out more than men, but I do have several cases that are really close to heart that come from the male population. And there's one in particular that I'll share here. And he gave me the okay. I've written about him in blogs and in the book. And so we can call him Lewis. That is his first name. I won't divulge anymore. He had hernia repairs, so inguinal hernia repairs with mesh, the plug, and he did have chronic pain. He was pretty good after surgery, so from his history, 3 or 4 months he was back to normal routine, and he was a construction manager doing all of the things. But months after he started feeling some of the systemic things creep up, his fatigue was kind of weighing him down. He wasn't able to spend all the hours necessary to be on site. And so with that, along with losing weight, significant amount of weight, and then just the mental toll that it started taking on him, he wasn't able to do his work functions, number one. And then at home, where he was the primary, like the handyman, we'll say, for lack of a better term, he was having to step back from maintaining home, and he saw his wife having to step up and then having to hire contractors to do the things that he used to do. And so when we started working together, we looked at all the pieces. We developed the protocol. We did the detox. We did drainage. Everything was good, but the fatigue was still there. And then the mental blockage there, where he was just feeling incredibly defeated, didn't shift until we looked at neuroplasticity. And that is why now it's an integral part of the foundation now is it's going to be in step one, where we're going to start working on things like EFT tapping, the emotional freedom technique. We're going to look at body scan, body awareness, making sure that we can pull out of that sympathetic, that fight or flight response that we're always in, so that we can really get down to the rest, repair, and restore functioning of the parasympathetic state. And so that is what he did, what made the drastic difference. And then within a month of integrating these modalities, we had some other tools too, like Resimax that he was able to use at home on a daily basis. And then he started feeling, little by little, within a month or two, all these things were lifting. And that just gave him the motivation to keep going. And now he's at 100% of what his function was prior. Oh, I left out a main piece that he did have one explant, but the right side, I believe, was retained. So yeah, he did lessen the burden in terms of material foreign body response, but there's still that other one that he's able to navigate through without consideration right now for another explant.
That's awesome. What a powerful story. And I love that you're tapping into neuroplasticity because it just amazes me how we're continually learning more things about the body and we just still don't hardly know anything it feels like. So I love that you're tapping into some of those modalities to really to really help people navigate this. So that's great. Looking ahead 3 to 5 years, how do you see this space evolving, especially as awareness grows around environmental toxins and personalized health and more integrative approaches to healing start to expand?
I think more and more there's more openness to the concept of organic foods and proper water quality. People have the knowledge and the resources now, and without getting into the whole political aspect, but with the new regime, that there is this shift that we're seeing in terms of food products, right? The processed foods. And it's a slow process, but it seems to be heading in the right direction with respect to what our children are eating and what is available. And even in just local markets, you can start seeing more and more options there. So I do see with the health space that we're going to focus on more of the proactive avenue of restoring health rather than the retroactive.
Yeah, taking more of that proactive approach is so important with health because we've for so long been so reactive in healthcare, and I feel like it's becoming more normal to take that preemptive, preventative care route instead. So that's a great point. Okay, before we wrap up, we're going to do a quick lightning round. So 4 quick questions, short answer. Are you ready? Get hyped. You
We
ready?
will try.
All right. What is one implant myth that you would love to eliminate?
An implant myth is that everybody's going to reject it. So not everybody does, but there is a probability of some inflammation happening there.
Awesome. Okay, what habit or mindset keeps you grounded when things feel high stakes?
The habit and mindset, I suppose, is that we have the ability to redirect any energy, any negative energy that is in our bodies, redirect it. And if we're just aware and catch it, and then set clear boundaries for ourselves, knowing where we were before versus where we are now versus where we want to be in the future.
I love that. Redirecting negative energy. That's great. I love that. Okay, so what is something in the space that gives you hope right now?
I think one of the biggest things is that the level of education and awareness is increasing, and people are asking better questions. They are advocating for themselves earlier. And then for practitioners out there, they're collaborating more. They're not working in silos, and they're just again thinking beyond the box that in the past or in some of the more traditional medical practices, or we'll say coaching, that it's not in a silo anymore.
That's great. Where can people find you if they want to learn more or connect with you?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, Nancy. They can find me on the website functionallyenlightened.com. Those are our social media handles too. So at Enlightened on Instagram, Facebook, and then we have information about the book that's launched recently. It is available in ebook, and so they can go to learn more about our process and learn more about just mesh in general and what people can look out for. All of that information is in the book.
What is the name of your book?
It's Meshed Up, A Guide to Healing from Implant Illness.
That's a great name. I love that. Awesome. Well, Sharon, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your work and your perspective. It's such an important conversation, and I know it's going to resonate with a lot of people. So thank you for sharing everything with us. I definitely learned a lot through this process.
Thank you so much, Nancy.
Absolutely. For everyone listening, make sure to connect with Sharon and check out Functionally Enlightened. And if you'd like to learn more about innovations in health, wellness, and the longevity space, and how these businesses are growing and scaling, make sure to like and subscribe to the Practice Pulse podcast. As always, innovation creates possibility, implementation turns it into growth. We'll see you on the next episode of the Practice Pulse.